You are sitting on cash right now, and you are not sure if it is the right amount. Too little, and one bad month wrecks everything. Too much, and you are quietly losing ground every single year. Here is what most people never figure out. The question is not whether to hold cash. The question is how much cash is actually doing a job, and how much is just costing you. By the end of this video, you will have a clear, specific answer for your situation. Not a generic number someone pulled from a blog. A framework you can actually use today. Now, here is the thing almost nobody talks about. There is a specific point where your cash cushion stops protecting you and starts working against you. We are going to identify exactly where that line is. And I will show you why most people over 40 never find it. Not because they are careless, but because nobody ever gave them the right diagnostic. Let me introduce you to Sandra, 52 years old, healthcare administrator, decent income. She had been carrying $47,000 in a standard savings account for almost 4 years. She told herself it was her safety net. Her advisor told her she was leaving money on the table. Sandra was not stupid. She was stuck in a framework that nobody had ever corrected. We are going to follow Sandra through this entire analysis because her situation is probably closer to yours than any hypothetical ever could be. Stop for a moment. Most of the cash advice you have heard falls into one of two camps. Camp 1 says you are losing to inflation and you need to deploy everything. Camp 2 says cash is king and you need a mountain of it. Both camps are calculating one side of the ledger and ignoring the other. That is the trap. The real question is not more cash or less cash. It is what specific job is your cash doing, and are you holding the right amount for that job? Not a blanket rule, not a percentage someone invented, a function. Cash that has a defined purpose is a tool. Cash with no defined purpose is a leak. Think about that. This reframe is not semantic. It changes every decision that follows. When Sandra came to terms with this, she realized she could not name what job her $47,000 was performing. She knew it felt safe, but safe and functional are not the same thing. That is the exact gap we are diagnosing today. The first layer of your cash cushion has one job: absorb a real emergency without forcing you to sell investments at a loss or carry high-interest debt. Let me be direct about that. This layer is not an investment. It is infrastructure. You do not optimize it for yield. You do not move it around chasing rates. It sits there, it does its job, and you leave it alone. Here is how you size it. Calculate your actual stripped-down monthly survival number. Not your lifestyle number. Your survival number. Housing, food, utilities, insurance, minimum debt payments. For most households in the United States right now, that number lands somewhere between $3,500 and $4,500 per month. 3 to 6 months of that stripped-down number is your non-negotiable floor. So for most people, that means somewhere between $10,500 and $27,000 in this first layer. A W-2 employee at a stable company with marketable skills can sit closer to 3 months. A commission-based worker, a self-employed person, or someone in a layoff-prone industry needs to sit closer to 6. Sandra's stripped-down monthly number was about $4,200. Her first layer target was between $12,600 and $25,200. She had $47,000 sitting in one account. Already you can see the diagnosis beginning to emerge. Here is where the conversation gets counterintuitive. Beyond your emergency layer, there is a second category that most people either ignore completely or misidentify: opportunity capital. And this layer has a completely different set of rules. Opportunity capital is cash you hold because you intend to deploy it. a down payment on a property within the next 2 years, a business purchase, a tax bill you know is coming, a planned investment window you are actively watching. This money has a destination. It has a timeline. That is what makes it legitimate. The critical distinction is this: opportunity capital without a deployment plan is not opportunity capital. It is just hoarding with a better name. That is the trap, and it is the trap Sandra was sitting in. She had framed her $47,000 as a combination of safety net and opportunity fund. But when pressed, she could not name a specific opportunity she was positioning for. No timeline, no target. Just a vague sense that something might come up. No timeline, no target. Think about that. Cash held for an undefined future. Opportunity is doing exactly the same damage as cash held out of pure fear. Both cost you the same drag. Both feel responsible. Neither is a strategy. The sizing rule for legitimate opportunity capital is specific. Name the opportunity. Name the approximate amount. Name the time frame. If you cannot do all three, that cash belongs in an investment account, not a savings account. For most stable earners between 40 and 55, true opportunity capital is somewhere between $0 and $15,000, depending on what is actually on their near-term horizon. Drop one word in the comments right now. Your biggest blocker when it comes to getting your cash positioned correctly. Is it fear? Confusion? Overwhelm? One word. Drop it below. Now, let us get to the part most people never reach. The part that actually tells you when you have too much cash and what that is silently costing you per year. Here is where the math gets real. If your emergency layer is funded and you have no near-term deployment target, cash sitting beyond that amount is not protecting you. It is costing you. Let me put real numbers on that. A high-yield savings account today pays somewhere between 4 and 4.5%. The average annual return of a broad market index fund over the long term has historically run around 10%. The gap between those two numbers, roughly 5.5 to 6 percentage points, is what every dollar beyond your defined layers is losing each year on a long horizon basis. On $20,000 held in excess of your functional target, that gap represents roughly $1,100 to $1,200 per year in opportunity cost. On $50,000 in excess, you are looking at somewhere between $2,700 and $3,000 annually, year after year, quietly, with no statement showing the loss, because it is money you never earned. Now, here is the number that matters for Sandra. She had $47,000 sitting in a standard savings account paying her essentially nothing. The national average for standard savings accounts sits around 38 basis points, which is effectively zero. Her first layer target was roughly $20,000. That means approximately $27,000 was sitting in excess with no defined job. At a 4% high-yield rate she was not capturing, and against a long-horizon market return, she was absorbing a meaningful annual drag with nothing to show for it. Here is the rule that ties the three layers together. Layer 1 covers survival. Layer 2 covers defined near-term deployment. Everything beyond those two layers, held in low-yield accounts with no destination, is not a cushion. It is a cost. And at 40, 45, 50, 52, you do not have decades to absorb that quietly. Every year matters. This is also the point where income stability changes the equation. A W-2 worker with strong employer benefits and marketable skills can lean toward the lower end of each layer. A self-employed person, a commission earner, someone 5 to 10 years from retirement, they legitimately need a larger buffer because their recovery window after a disruption is narrower. The framework does not change. The inputs do. Here is what I want you to understand. If you are over 40 and you have been sitting on more cash than you need, that is not a discipline failure. It is not laziness. It is the predictable result of a framework you were never taught. Nobody sat you down at 35 and showed you a 3-layer model with real numbers. You did what felt responsible. You kept money somewhere safe. That made complete sense given what you knew. The problem is not your intention. The problem is the architecture. Intention without architecture produces the same outcome every time. You feel responsible, you stay cautious, the years pass, and the gap between where you are and where you need to be quietly widens. Not because you failed, because you were running a habit instead of a system. Sandra is a perfect example of this. She was not reckless. She was careful. She funded her 401k. She avoided debt. She did everything the standard advice told her to do. And still, $47,000 sat in an account for 4 years, doing approximately zero work because nobody had ever handed her a lens to diagnose the function of each dollar. The problem was structural, not behavioral. The architecture is not complicated. 3 layers, each with a specific job. Each sized by your actual situation, not a generic rule. Once the architecture is in place, the cash question stops being emotional and starts being operational. That is the shift. Not discipline, not motivation. Architecture you were never taught. One rule: your cash cushion should be able to answer 3 questions cold, without you having to think about it. Question 1. What is your stripped-down monthly survival number? And how many months does your Layer 1 cash cover? If you cannot answer that right now with a specific number, your emergency layer is not a system. It is a guess, and guesses break when you need them most. Question 2. Do you have a named, timed, and quantified opportunity that your Layer 2 cash is positioned for? Not a vague possibility. A named target with a dollar amount and a time frame. If you cannot fill in all 3 blanks, that cash belongs somewhere earning more than 4%. Question 3. Is your excess cash, everything beyond Layer 1 and Layer 2, sitting in a high-yield account earning at minimum 4%? Or is it sitting in a standard savings account earning 38 basis points? Because the difference on $30,000 over 5 years is not trivial. It is somewhere between $5,000 and $6,000 you either keep or silently donate to your bank. That is the entire playbook. 3 questions, each with a specific numeric answer. If any of the 3 produces a blank or a vague response, that is where your cash architecture has a gap. That is where you start. Not with motivation, not with a big financial overhaul. One gap, one fix. That is how irreversible wealth gets built. One structural correction at a time. Sandra ran this diagnostic. Her Layer 1 was adequately funded. Her Layer 2 was undefined, no named opportunity, no timeline. Her excess of roughly $27,000 was sitting in a standard savings account at near zero yield. 2 corrections. Move the excess to a high-yield account immediately. Decide within 30 days whether any of it has a defined deployment target or whether it goes into her investment account. 2 decisions. Clear, specific, executable tonight. My friend, here is where we land. Sandra did not have a discipline problem. She had an architecture problem. And when the architecture got clear, the decisions got simple. That is the whole point of this diagnostic. Not to judge where you are, to show you exactly where the gaps are so you can close them with precision. You came into this video with a number in your head. Some amount sitting somewhere. Maybe it felt like too much. Maybe it felt like barely enough. Here is what I want you to leave with. Run the 3 questions. Calculate your stripped-down monthly survival number. Name every opportunity your cash is positioned for with a dollar amount and a timeline attached. Check the yield on every account holding more than $5,000. Those 3 actions take less than 90 minutes. Most people never do them. The ones who do find the gap. And finding the gap is the beginning of closing it. The cash cushion is not about being safe. It is not about being aggressive. It is about every dollar having a defined job, a defined location, and a defined purpose. When your money has architecture, you stop managing chaos and start building something that does not depend on perfect decisions or perfect timing. That is built with intention. And wealth built with intention becomes irreversible.